Well, good morning. My name is Nyari, and it's my first time in Poland. So I'm really excited to be here and really grateful to Raphael for the invitation. I'm going to have 2 introductory slides because I'm not good at following simple instructions like use this slide. So my talk today is about putting the first things first. And so I've got another slide that says exactly the same thing. But before I start, just to give a little bit of context, because I realize I'm coming from far away, we are on the same time zone, so I can't really argue jet lag. But this is a bit of background about me. My name is Nyari, like I said, and I was born and raised in Harare, Zimbabwe, small country in southern Africa. And my background actually starts off in finance, and I always say this because when I'm around a lot of techies, I get a bit anxious and I have mild imposter syndrome because I spent the first 12 years of my working life in finance. And I worked in Zimbabwe, which is where I was raised. I worked in the United States in New York, and then I also worked in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. My obsession for those 12 years was around finance, measuring businesses by the money they make. And so my job, initially in accounting and then later in financial consulting, was organizing businesses to make sure that they're financially lucrative. So we all get up in the morning and we wash our faces and we go to work and we do a bunch of things. How do we know that the bunch of things that we did actually made value? And that's what finance was essentially about. So, and I have a short concentration span, so I refused to specialize for a long time. And so my expertise spanned from valuing the roots of sugarcane in farming parts of Zimbabwe to valuing derivatives of precious metals and so forth. But what I found with the line of work that I was in, which made it a little bit boring and made me want to shift, was the fact that other people did all the cool stuff, and then my job was to come when they were done and try and measure what they did. And so fun and exciting as finance was, I decided to switch over into technology. So after about 12 years in there, I moved to South Africa, and I've spent the last 7 years working in software. And so now I don't just tell people how they can do better. I actually fail at doing anything I'm trying to do, and hope no one shows up and tells me how to change it around. And so the last 7 years, when I switched into technology, I worked for a software company named ThoughtWorks. They had just opened in South Africa, and they're a global software development company. And the first responsibility that I had in there was that there's this thing in software where everybody is concerned with, quote, business value. And you know, software developers say business value a lot. Sometimes I agree with you, sometimes not so much. And my job was to try and be part of teams in making sure that the things we are building are actually business value. Try to make sure that those people in the ivory towers that are trying to increase stakeholder value can speak in simple English to software developers about what they're trying to do. And when software developers spend a lot of time building, that they can also go back and explain to other people what they're trying to do. Because I don't know if you know, but software developers sometimes don't always speak in words that everybody knows what they're doing. And so that was my transition into software. So I spent the last 7 years doing that, predominantly based in Johannesburg in South Africa. I do a bit of work in Cape Town and a little bit around the continent of Africa as well, in Kenya, Ghana, and so forth. But primarily I'm based in South Africa now. And so what I do now is I'm involved in what's called digital transformation. And don't shoot me down yet. I'm going to try and speak about it as honestly and authentically as I can. And so essentially the work I do now, after leaving ThoughtWorks, formed a consulting company with 2 colleagues, and that's Fold Left. So we design digital solutions for large enterprises. And here's the thing with digital transformation. Everyone who says it means a very, very, very different thing. In summary, though, I think the transformation word is maybe the more important one than the digital one. So the transformation word generally means that people are doing things in a particular way and they want to do them differently, because if they do them differently, they'll either make more money or spend less money, which means in the end they make more money. And so that's the digital transformation. And how we got into this work was we found that when we were working on software projects in ThoughtWorks, when our job was delivery, we would get into these positions where there was a lot of tension and fighting, and as a software delivery team, we were always in trouble. It was always us. We weren't delivering on time. We were delivering wrong things. The quality wasn't great. The competitors were going to come and eat us up. Scream, run. And we didn't always understand why. Like, why are you mad? Why are you impatient? What have we done wrong? And in that work, we came to realize that the issue with digital transformation is that the answers are usually already in the room, but people are talking past each other. what's usually happening is that we are doing things a particular way. The particular way we are doing them is not optimally using computing power. So either the computer solution that we're using is not fast enough because it was designed 80 years ago, or we've over time picked up a lot of bits and bobs that we've attached to it, and now when it connects to each other, it moves slowly. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it faster. Or we designed it in a time where it worked with a lot of manual intervention. There was a person behind a screen who was serving the customer. Now we want the customer to serve themselves. So the transformation journey, I think, is more about increasing the effectiveness of computing power in how the business works. And that's what we do now. And so we go from sitting with the business and understanding what they want to do. For example, if you're in Africa, one of the big things that's topical is banking, what we call the unbanked. So this is a segment of the population that's not actually involved in the formal economy. So this is where the money is under the mattress and nobody knows it's there. The government wants to tax it. The person who's putting it under the mattress actually wants to grow it. They're having a hard time transacting with other people. And so banking the unbanked might be the problem that a business wants to solve. The question becomes, well, why isn't everybody just, using all the services that are available? So we work with businesses from that point of saying, well, what's the problem we're actually trying to solve? All the way to how do we actually roll it out and implement it? And so what we've found is that a good friend of mine always makes the point that once it's a technical problem, we tend to know how to solve those. The problems we usually have are the people problems. The people understanding what they actually want, people talking to each other properly about what they want, saying what they mean, and making sure that everybody around you actually understands you. And so that's sort of my day job. And so part of it is that, yes, I do get frustrated with my clients, but I also realize that if they weren't doing those frustrating things, I'd be out of work. And so I'd be without work, jobless, unemployed, and in a desperately bad position. But have more recently tried to start to synthesize the things that we observe and share them. And that's what the talk today is about. It's this aspect of why is it hard for us as people when we say we know what good looks like, when we say we know where we want to go, when we say we know what we don't like, why is it so hard for us to go from the state we're in today to that state that we are clearly aspiring towards? And so I started by trying to define, to answer the question of, not sure why. I've lost control. Okay, why transformation is hard. And so I put the contradiction. The one state you're in is you're maintaining the status quo. The other one is that you're trying to transform the status quo. And why are those two things different? In maintaining the status quo, you're required to know exactly what you have. So you wake up in the morning, you know what the thing is. You switch it on, you know where to press, and it works, right? If you're going to drive your car, take me, for example. When I'm in South Africa, I mostly drive. I get into the car, I know where to put the key, I know how to turn the key, and from there, I'm in autopilot. I just go. I know what I need to do. When I show up in Poland and I arrive at the airport, I am calling Mikhail like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to use the Uber, and suddenly my roaming is not working, etc. So I'm in a transformed state. And so suddenly, my level of ignorance goes from, I don't even remember how I got out of bed and ended up at my desk in the morning some days, to I'm sitting in Poland and everything. I have to think about everything. Like I'm trying to order food, I read the thing. I have no idea what it is saying. It could actually be saying, poison, poison will kill your body. And I'm just going to eat it up because I don't know. And so essentially going into a transformative state is one of going from, you know everything you're doing, to one of going into high ignorance, right? And so that's uncomfortable. And it's so uncomfortable that oftentimes we don't want to declare that. We don't want to declare the fact that I don't know. I don't know. I know everybody's doing mobile and it's apparently sweeping everything away, but I don't know enough. I don't know enough about mobile development. I don't know enough about the customer in a world of mobile where previously I served them when they walked into a shop. And so that's the big shift that happens, at least within the human mind, of you move from a place where you've been effective, you've been valuable, you've been supposedly good at what you do, or at least you've convinced everybody that you are, to a state where you now are freaking out inside because you don't know where to start. And I think that's where the problems that we see in the software, in the computers, and in the organizations actually start. Is it's at that first point of saying, I want to transform, which means I'm moving from a comfortable place to a place of high ignorance and rapid change. And so let's look at the conventional wisdom around tech. Tech is fast-paced and adaptive. This is the theory, right? And it's done some things to enable it to be fast-paced and adaptive. We've heard about microservices. I just picked out a few. There are a lot of others that you could use as examples. We've got microservices. What does that mean? We're going to modularize the enterprise. We don't have to boil oceans anymore. We're going to break up big pictures into smaller pieces, and then we'll have discrete units. Each one has its own database. So what does that allow the enterprise to do? It can run at multiple speeds. What used to be one giant monolith is now a lot of separate pieces, and each piece can change at its own rate. That allows us to change quickly because it's smaller, it's contained, and we understand it, right? In addition to this, we've got cloud computing. So we have this elastic computing. When we want more capacity, we can take it, and we don't have to go out and tinker with the machines and set up the infrastructure. We can leverage what's out there. So we can increase our capacity pretty quickly to give us what we need. And then, of course, we've got our agile methodologies, right? And what do the agile methodologies allow us to do? We break up big problems into small problems. We create cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams, add the jargon in there. And what those people do is they can solve any kind of problem in small pieces pretty quickly, pretty effectively. And so because of this, tech can move fast. We've got the methods technically to break it into a microservice. We've got teams that focus on each of those functional pieces that can solve them quickly. And we've got elasticity of computing because welcome to the cloud, right? That's what we claim. And then this is where the rubber hits the road. And then we must deal with reality. Greenfield solutions are not tidy. And so, at least in my line of work, which is predominantly enterprise, I don't have any exposure at all to startups, so forgive me if my view is a little bit blinkered, but I'm going to try and talk about what I've seen. Most large enterprises do not have the privilege of building new systems from scratch. I don't know if you've watched this show, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. It's a very dramatic show. So they identify a family that's deserving. They go into this family's house. They pack them up and move them out of the house for 2 weeks. They literally demolish the whole house. They level it. And in 2 weeks, they build up the whole house, plumbing, wiring, everything, furniture, decor, all of that. And then 2 weeks later, they put a big bus, big truck to cover the house. And then everybody shouts, "Bus driver, move that bus." They move the bus and revealed is a brand new home, 2 weeks. I've done renovations on my bathroom. Literally all the gray hair in my head was from that one little bathroom renovation, and trying to, between myself and the plumber and the tiler and the builder, agree to change this 5 square meters of space into what my dream was. So I don't know how Extreme Makeover Home Edition does it, but I definitely know that in technology, that's not how life works. Why? Because the reality is that most enterprises have an existing state of technology. And so you don't get to just wake up one morning and decide that I want straight-through processing. And so I'm going to get Kafka, and I'm going to get a stream of messages going this way to that side. And I'm just going to remove all other data that was there before, and I'm going to store it this way, read it this way. Everybody can listen, and there are events now. That's not how tech works. How tech actually works is that there's an existing system that's actually working. Customers are on it. They're using it. We claim we've got user acceptance testing environments, but they look nothing like production. So even when we're changing things and it works over here, it works on your machine, it works in UAT, it doesn't work in production. You've got to integrate into a whole bunch of things. And so in reality, there's no bus driver moving any bus. Like, we're all scurrying around like little hamsters until 2 a.m. And then when it comes time to deploy, it's like... And then we bring the whole bank down, and then, the apocalypse. So greenfield is not there in technology. We don't have the privilege of this shiny, perfect world. Yesterday's solutions are today's problems. So where that enterprise services bus was a great idea at some point, because it was going to allow us to bring all these disparate systems together and collate all this information, guess what? Not so much today. And when you come up with the next great idea, you've still got to deal with that mainframe that was there and that enterprise services bus that you put on, and now you're going to do microservices on that. Good luck. But essentially, what now happens is that you must deal with all your bright ideas from yesterday when you come up with a new bright idea today, right? And then agile transformation is never quick, right? It's never quick. If anyone is a parent, you can tell us about how you try to change the patterns of your small family. It's like 4 people in that house. And, you're just trying to get those 4 people to get on a different timeline. We're going to get up at 6 and we'll be out the door at 7. Good luck. I was trying to explain to someone the other day that you're never going to get me to be a morning person many years ago. Tangent story, but I think it's interesting. I've never liked waking up in the morning. And my mother woke me up. I think I was probably about 5 years old. She woke me up, and I went back to sleep. She found me in the bed. She marches in, and I remember this incident quite well. She screams at me like, I told you to wake up 5 minutes ago, get up. And then she marched me into the bathroom and left me in the bathroom. And I wasn't much bigger than I am now when I was 5. So there was a mat in the bathroom. She closed the door. I curled up on the bathroom mat and covered myself with the towel and fell asleep. When she came back 15 minutes later, when I should have been leaving the bathroom, what she found was an adorable, cute, sleeping little baby who had done nothing in the last 15 minutes and time was running out. And that's just a household with one person trying to change the patterns of one child. And I'm really not that stubborn. I'm a nice person. Can you imagine at an enterprise scale, you walk in and you say, we are going to come up with new ways of working. All 3,000 of us are going to hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and not go in this direction, but we're going to go in that direction. That is the definition of not quick. And so the reality is that while we talk about technology as this rapidly transformative, quickly changing world, where we've got ways of working that allow us to be fast, we've got computing techniques that allow us to be fast, that's really not what's happening, right? Change is much, much, much slower than what we're willing to admit. And so to illustrate my point, I obviously picked 2 examples that line up to my point, and I'm going to insist that they're statistically relevant and that on the basis of this, I am correct. But I picked 2. One is mobile phones and the other is AI. So let's talk about the starting of the phone. And I start in 1877, which is when the fixed line telephone comes into play. Before this, there was, the wires with the cans on either end, and if you had the rope in the middle and it was taut enough, the sound could go through. The telegraph, all this comes before this. But then now we've got a fixed line phone. And when the fixed line phone is invented in 1877, it's 1973 before we've got a mobile phone prototype, which is this gigantic Motorola Dynatac, which is like, you kind of hold it with 2 hands. And I think it was costing at the time $3,500 United States dollars, $8,000 in today's money. And it had 30 minutes of talk time. That was in 1973. So you've got almost 100 years in between the first telephone coming into play and the first mobile telephone that's completely untethered to any wires. In between there, you've got, some advancements. You've got the tap phone, you've got your phone ID. But essentially 100 years before we go from a phone line that's wired to everything to the first mobile phone. The first voice over IP, 1991. Right? So even now that we've got the mobile phone, we're still using the old technology to actually transmit sound. It's only 1991 before you've got voice over IP. And then you're going into the 2000s is when you start to see smartphones come into play. I mean, it's mind-boggling when I think of my first laptop and its capacity, and I compare to what I now hold in the palm of my hand, quite dramatic. And then we tend to say, change is quick. But is it really? Because it takes us, 150 years to go from that first telephone to this mobile phone. It takes us 20-some years to go from a mobile phone to actually being able to use data to change fundamentally the way we are sending out communication. And then let's talk about another red herring, which is artificial intelligence. So we're all worried, 4IR, 4IR, 4IR. And I'll keep saying it until you're blue in the face because everybody keeps hearing it and I get calls. Do you want to talk about 4IR? I'm like, I don't know what it is. But anyway, 4IR is coming, or is here, or it's 3IR. Nobody really knows, but there's an IR. And artificial intelligence. So it starts out with Turing, and I just watched the movie Imitation Games, which is a fun one. You should check it out if you haven't already. Maybe we can do it later because we're in a cinema and we've got the screen. But essentially, in the 1950s, Dartmouth College takes a lot of the work that Turing and others have done on the computer, and they decide that, okay, we're going to do some work on the artificial intelligence thing. They get together, they have this big workshop, and they come up with a whole bunch of great ideas around artificial intelligence. At that point, they estimate that in 20 years' time, everything that a person can do, a computer will be able to do. That was in the 1950s. So they estimated by the time 1980 at the latest, we would all be redundant. We'd get to stay home, drink wine, hang out with our kids, eat some cheese, and we wouldn't need to go to work because the computers would do everything that we can do. Does that sound familiar, that claim that very soon we're all going to be annihilated and removed from any productive relevance because guess what? The computers and the robots are taking over. And then there's so many movies in between that, have introduced this claim. But then in reality, they made these very, 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 very dramatic claims, failed to deliver on them, and by 1970, funding for AI research had dried up. So it's called the winter of AI in the 70s. Hardly any movement, why big promises didn't deliver, and fortunately, all of us managed to keep our jobs and stay relevant. And then it picks up again, mostly military, looking at some things and start to fund it. Some stuff starts happening in Japan, so money starts going into it again. We have the list machine in the 1980s, which then subsequently gets replaced as the computing power improves. And then by 1990, Moore's law, there's been a number of movements on various fronts. So computer chips have become more powerful. They're storing more data. They're crunching more complex things. It all comes together. Mathematicians have gotten more involved and plugged into this thing, and they're bringing the discipline and the practices of mathematics into it. And then you start to see it take off again. So from the 1990s is when we start to see artificial intelligence being used in medical diagnostics. We start to see artificial intelligence being used in education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then now we're in 2019. So this is 1900s is when Moore's law kicks in and we're saying, okay, we're serious now. 1990s. And then in 2000, we're still here making the same claim, but only it's happening now, like right now. I often talk about how in South Africa, the way we deal with time is maybe different from the rest of the world. So in South Africa, if I say, I'll see you now, I mean, I'll see you. If I say, I'll see you now, I mean, yeah, I really, really want to see you. And if I say, I'll see you just now, that means, okay, give or take an hour. So maybe that's the same timelines of language that are being used here, which is that essentially, now, or just now, artificial intelligence is going to wipe us all out, and computers are going to do all the things that we're doing, and we're not going to be needed. But the point I'm trying to illustrate, and maybe I'm belaboring it, is that the pace of change is not as fast as we think it is. And so when we are reacting and we're making decisions, maybe we should align ourselves to the real trajectory and timeline of the change in computing power, and not the one that we've somehow emotionally conjured in our heads that this is extreme makeover computer edition, and in 2 weeks' time, all human capacity will be replaced by computers. Maybe the reality is a little further from that. So then I went just one more example to look at the pace of change of ways of working. I read The Mythical Man Month for the first time, I think about 3-4 years. I don't know, show of hands, has anyone read Mythical Man Month by Brooks? Okay. This is a really good book about project management. And Brooks was involved in developing systems for IBM. And at the end of it, he wrote essentially what's like a great essay/case study on the things that they did wrong. And one of the key arguments that Brooks makes is that adding manpower to a project that's falling behind and that is running slowly makes the project run even slower. Now, who has been on a project where we were running behind and we just needed more resources? Yeah? Okay. Brooks figured this out 44 years ago. And why we're not redundant is not only are our good ideas still relevant, our bad ones, 44 years later, hold on to those ones as well. So 44 years ago, Brooks cracks it. When we're moving slowly, you don't just throw bodies at a software project. Like if it had 5 people that were moving slowly, when it has 10 people, it moves slower and costs more. That's in 1970 or so. Brooks publishes this paper. Extreme Programming, XP, Kent Beck. 20 years ago is when he released the XP Explained, and then 5 years later, he published the second edition. And this was around how do we make the time we spend in building software more efficient? And how do we spend most of our time doing the things that make it more efficient and less of our time doing the fluffy things that don't help us get anywhere? 20 years later, XP is still not mainstream. For my sins, when I'm not doing software consulting, I also run a nonprofit that trains young students to code. So we take students between the ages of 18 and 35, and we take people that have no background in software development, and through a 2-year program, teach them to code. And I remember speaking to one of our second years who's really excited because now he's going to go and he's going to start his new job. And I was asking him about XP, and he had never heard of XP. 20 years on, XP is not mainstream. The Agile Manifesto is 18 years ago. And that complexity that I talked about changing the organization into an agile organization, 18 years in, we haven't all gotten it. In fact, I was involved in an argument the other day about should we be doing agile or waterfall, because then there was lots of fighting. And in my head, it's like, you want to change agile, small a at a minimum, agility for change, critical. But we're still debating these things all these years on. And so the point that I'm really trying to make is that our world is not changing as fast as we'd like to say it's changing. And so this chart might be familiar to most. This is the technology adaptation chart, right? Innovators right in the front, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards, right? And this is the arc of change, generally, that technology follows. And 2.5% or so are the innovators. Those are the people who, the moment you say you've got a new idea, they go buy that crazy expensive mobile phone for $4,000 and they're like walking around thinking they look cool. But they'll try anything. So these are the people who get that spark. And then the early adopters come on, and that's the next 13% or so of people. The point is that that first gray block that we're looking at over there tends to take a long time. That tends to roll in decades when we're really bringing in new technology. Between the time that Kodak invented digital photography and the time that they completely missed the point and got annihilated by this thing that they actually invented is decades, not weeks, not months. It's decades. And so in that early adopter, innovator phase, it takes many years. And there's a few reasons for that. At that point, the technology is complicated. There are a lot of pieces that need to line up. The regulation isn't there. And like we saw with the Moore's Law, a number of pieces need to come together, from data availability, from the hardware doing what it needs to do, and then from consumers being willing to adopt it, right? All these things need to come together, and that time is difficult. Most of us will work in that early majority, late majority phase, which is where there's a proven prototype of tech that works, right? And we're mimicking. So we're not the inventor of the concept of a smartphone. We're not the inventor of a mobile application. But now that there is a mobile application and a way to build it, many of us work in the mimicry. It's like, how do I use a mobile application for this or that or this or that? And that moves a little bit quicker. But what that means is that a business model that's working and that's established is not rapidly at risk of innovators and early adopters, before you deploy your first mobile app, coming and wiping you out, you know, with some virtual reality goggle thing that means the mobile phone is redundant. That's not happening. What's happening is that, more likely, you've got quite a bit of time to iterate over a mobile phone. Deploy it, make it work, and actually have a bunch of people use it. And a lot of those people are going to be happy to use it, because when someone walks in and says, oh no, you don't need that anymore, wear these glasses and they'll be your phone, many of us are going to be like, you know, my phone works, thank you, bye. And so essentially, you've got more time than you need. And so if this is the case, it's not the rapid change that sinks us. It's the fear and the panic. The only thing that's worse than not having a lot of time is wasting the little time you have. I watched a movie on the flight here. It's called The Last Breath. This is a diver, professional diver, working in the deep sea somewhere off the coast of the United Kingdom. And he's got something called an umbilical cord that ties him to the mothership. It delivers warm water that keeps his body warm. It delivers oxygen and all of the stuff. His job is to go down to some oil rig and do some mechanical things on that. They've got some hectic winds that shift the ship away. He gets cut off by the umbilical cord. Basically, now he's stranded in the deep sea by himself with no line of oxygen. He's got 2 small tanks on his back that give him 5 minutes of breath. What he realizes is that in the first 1 minute, he's panicking, taking up more oxygen than he should be taking, and not making a plan. So if you've got 5 minutes to make the decisions that are the difference between life and death, better calm down and make the right decisions. Because if you're using up oxygen in those 5 minutes, and then at the end of the 5 minutes, you're like, I I should probably be sitting on the top of this thing because when they come back to rescue me, that's where they'll find me. Then in 5 minutes, you're dead and you can do nothing. And so it's not the rapid change that sinks you. It's the fear and the panic. It's this sense that I'm redundant, I'm irrelevant. Oh my God, what should I do? And then you make crazy decisions back to back. That's actually what sinks you and makes you annihilated. And so we've identified a few patterns. Stay calm first. But then we've identified a few patterns of panic. And the first one is that we panic and we say technology changes rapidly and we need to act fast or risk annihilation. We're going to be Nokia. We're going to be Kodak. No one's going to remember we ever existed. I was asking my nephew about Nokia the other day. He had never heard of it. So the idea that Nokia at some point was ubiquitous with mobile telephony, my 10-year-old nephew doesn't even know what Nokia is. But then when you look at how long it took for Nokia to vanish, it wasn't weeks or months. So we get into this panicked state where we're like, everything is changing. I can't keep up. I'm going to get annihilated. And we start making panicked decisions and reactions to that. The other pattern of panic is that my skills are redundant and I am irrelevant. And this is a crazy, dangerous one. This is the one where anybody who walks in the room to try to talk to you, you're angry, they're wrong, they don't understand you. What do they know about this enterprise? I don't know if anyone's ever seen this and can see themselves in that or has ever experienced this. When you're brought in and we're going to try this new thing and like, no, we don't pair program. No, we don't need tests. No. Because why? Any kind of change means that by tomorrow I won't be needed. I won't matter. And so the kinds of decisions that you make now are survivalist. They are not about what moves the organization forward. They're not about what moves the program forward. They're not about what makes you better. They're about how do I make sure that I hold on to something so that when I wake up tomorrow, someone still thinks I'm useful, right? When I do talk about the concept of the fourth industrial revolution, at least in South Africa, one of the things that I've said is people often refer to, computers are coming and they're taking everybody's job. And usually the way we want to think about it is, there used to be tellers in a bank. There used to be, people who they were at a till in a supermarket. All of those jobs are going away. But then people like myself who spent too much time getting too many degrees in accounting, we don't want to admit that we're becoming redundant, right? Because we also risk annihilation. It's easier to make it someone else's problem. And then when someone comes in to talk to me as an accountant, I want to make sure you understand every intricate complexity because I don't want to be annihilated. You see the same thing starting to happen in software. Is that either someone is telling you that new age stuff won't work here? You don't understand this enterprise? We've been around here for 30 years. I was here coding in RPG however many years ago, and we can solve this problem. I just need to patch this thing over here. And they start to push you back because of that fear of redundancy, which is an emotional reaction to this concept of the change is coming faster than I can respond. And then there's the last one, which is usually the consequence of the other one, and that's the reality distortion. It's necessary for budget approval, right? Because if you tell these people the truth, are they going to let you do what you need to do? So let's just pretend that we can build this thing in 3 to 6 months. Let's just pretend that if we spin up a squad, aka team, and that squad is focused on this, that, and the other, and we tell them that it'll be done in 3 months, and then we're going to transform, we're going to deploy it live, because why? We've got test coverage, and so, we can do it quickly, then I'll figure it out after. Let me just get into a meeting and throw all the jargon, blockchain, microservices, evolutionary architecture, and then the business person just gets freaked out. They're like, okay, take money, get out before my brain explodes, right? And then while they're calming down, I'm somehow going to close the gap. And what have we just done? We've gone from a place where we're like, okay, I'm getting annihilated. I need to stay relevant. No change can happen except the change that I say is happening. We've told a few lies. I know how to do this and this and this and this and this so that I can stay relevant. I can solve the problem really quickly. You're not going to know that anything happened. And then by the time you blink, everything will be perfect because this thing will be live, right? Only it never really is. Instead, what happens is that we make it worse. We talk about abstraction layers that we're going to insert in there, and then they're going to abstract away the complexity that we don't want to deal with, and they're going to allow us to modularize the top layer, and then somehow we'll have an evolutionary architecture that moves quickly. But what we actually do is we increase complexity. So we now know that the innovators and the early adopters have established a solution that really works. We're kind of attracted to it. But instead of learning what it actually is, we stage this complicated, expensive fiction, and with the staging of that fiction, I see a hand in the back. Is that a question? Oh, no. Okay. So we stage this complicated fiction, and then we make it worse. We increase our lead times because now we're working with tech we don't understand and telling lies, and then we reduce our own effectiveness because now we're surrounded by the consequences of all our problems. And so I think my appeal is to try and do something a little bit different. First thing is do no harm. When things can't be done, they can't be done. And just take a breath. Like, no, we can't give you that thing in 3 months. Because I think all of us that work in tech know this. We know this. We know this from the moment someone walks in and says, we need to change this, that, and the other, and we need to reduce the full-time head count, and then we're going to save $1 million. Before they're even done speaking in that first meeting, we know it's impossible, right? At least acknowledging that it's impossible allows us to realign ourselves to reality. So when things can't be done, they can't be done. And we need to say so. Rather than going to bed like stomach churning, head spinning, panic everywhere because you told one lie after the other, maybe just say that. Maybe if we all banded together and we just said, nah, son, it's not going to happen. We need more time. Yes, we've heard of the blockchains, but we don't really know yet how to implement them in this environment. We need some time. Could you give us some space to research that? Could you help me understand what outcome you're actually looking for and actually allow me to construct a problem that ties to the solution? So the first thing is don't do harm. Don't just jump in there and start mixing up the pot and muddying the waters before you actually know what you're trying to do. The second recommendation, factfulness. So this is a really cool book by Hans Rollings, and he was an expert in like public health at scale, and then brought with that an analysis of data. And what he brings to bear is this concept that the world is not as bad as we think. Just because we make sure that on the news channel we put the worst and ugliest pictures of the most scariest of things doesn't mean we're actually regressing and we're about to like burn up the earth. There's a lot of things we're doing wrong, a lot of things we could do better, but maybe it's not actually all doom and gloom. But it's this idea that use data to inform your decisions. So when you find yourself in a panic, maybe check. When you're worried that, oh no, our competitors are doing all these things and if we don't land them tomorrow, maybe check. When you say, okay, we're going to transform our monolith into microservices within 3 months, has anybody ever done that? How are you going to test it? Why do you need it? Maybe check the facts, and actually manage your emotions and anxiety rather than reacting to every feeling you ever had. There's this theory that feelings are never wrong, it's what you do with them. And we do a lot with them. And that's what's wrong, is we feel and we act. We feel. And then before we know it, we've made a really big mess. And then you look back and you're like, yeah, was it really that bad? Maybe not. So maybe when you're feeling anxiety, apply some data and analytics to it. And then say, what do we need and in what timeline? Because things are not always as bad as you think. You probably have more time than you actually think you might have had. And then lastly, know your worth. Don't panic, which I keep saying, because panic will lead you to dismiss your own value, right? One of the things that I've learned in my transition from finance into tech is that there are a lot of gray beards and a lot of gray-haired ladies without whom I wouldn't be able to do some very basic things. So it makes me really sad when I see people who are really experienced, more preoccupied with relevance and being wiped out than realizing that actually we are probably quite lost without you. And so take a deep breath. Understand the value that you bring. And then if you're part of the transition around of what your today value is versus your tomorrow value is, then the pace of things starts to change. Bring your knowledge to the table and say that, okay, this is how I see myself today. This is how I see my value today. And you more than anyone know all the reasons why the way we are doing things today could be made better. And then be part of that solution. Because that change arc is actually a few years long, if not a decade or two, right? So there's a lot of time for you to contribute to that transformation. And the transformation will likely be more effective if a lot of experienced people are at the table explaining the context of why we got to where we are. And then in closing, I'd like to share this concept of Amara's law. So Roy Amara shares that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So we make a lot of short-term decisions because we think, tomorrow I'll be redundant. Tomorrow we won't have cell phones. Tomorrow we won't have computers. Tomorrow we won't need people. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And then we make very rash short-term decisions, whereas the reality is it's in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 15 years. And as I've gotten older, I've seen how I make those decisions differently. In my career, when I was starting out and I was 20, it's like, oh my goodness, I missed that promotion in these 6 months. I'm going to be left behind. And then now that I'm older, I'm able to take a deep breath and be like, I made up that 6 months. That timeline was never really a real timeline. It was never actually tied to anything of significance. And so now you can make decisions that are more pragmatic. You can lose money in the short term to make it in the long term. You can build things in the short term that stabilize you and enable you to move faster in the long term. You can go back in time and straighten things out, because suddenly when you look at the arc of your life in a 10, 20, 30, 40-year way, as opposed to 5 minutes, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, then you've got the time to make pragmatic choices. You've got the time to learn. You've got the time to improve, and you've got the time to do better. And so I think that would be the parting word, because when I came across this quote, I was like, this is actually powerful. This is the key thing, is I know I personally make better decisions when I feel like I've got the time than when I think, I got to do it now. And so with that, I'll stop there and say thank you.